Erica and her friend, who will rename anonymous, said they would be glad to stick around and talk about more stuff. So we've got Erica for some more time.
Yes.
Erica Lukes is the newest in Utah. She is the brand new state director for MUFON. And we had a great talk for 2 hours. And I know there's a lot more to cover that we thought, well, another interview, and, well, here it is. So you're right back again.
It's funny how that happens.
It is funny, so I want to thank her for sticking around. The Fringe Radio Show covers anything related to ghosts, paranormal, conspiracies, UFOs, alien and alien abduction, science and science fiction, cryptozoology, afterlife, near-death experiences, historical events and conspiracies, anything shrouded in just a little bit of mystery. You can find Fringe Radio on the World Wide Web at fringeradioshow.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. If you have a story, an experience, a sighting, or if you've got questions for our guests, which we have a bunch more that we never got to, and now we will, go to the contact page, send us an email, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Coming up here in just a couple of weeks, Comic-Con will be back in Salt Lake City at the Salt Palace, the 4th through the 6th of September. Is that Labor Day weekend, I think?
Oh, boy, I hope not.
Or maybe Labor Day.
No,
Somebody said it comes earlier this year. Yeah, so that's going to be coming up. And just a lot of fun. Again, Brian is Big Shiny Robot is kind of a, I shouldn't say well, it is. It's a geek news site, and so interesting. And Brian is an expert when we talk about Star Wars, and we'll get Brian back on. I know he's very busy, and he did send me an email, and we'll get him back on because we'd love to have him on. He's a filmmaker, author, journalist. He's written several books. He has a children's history of presidential assassination, comics, all kinds of stuff. He writes for City Weekly. Contributes to Huffington Post and Star Wars Insider. We want to talk about Star Wars, especially with the new film coming up. So we'll get Brian back. Anyway, we have Erica here, and again, she's going to stick around for a little bit more, and we want to thank you. So we were talking what some other subjects that we were maybe going to hit upon a little bit. Of course, you talked about your role in MUFON and how getting people involved. What are some of your, maybe we can delve into some of the cases because you brought a whole stack of books with you.
Well,
what are some of your, what's your favorite stuff to do with, tell me some of the favorites that you've got.
Oh, my, you know what I love, and I think anybody in ufology has to know about Rendlesham.
Okay.
And so I just got a couple months ago a book that Nick Pope, who we all know, and then with John Burroughs, and then Jim Peniston, who actually has turned out to be quite a lovely little Facebook friend of mine. I just adore him, and we chat briefly, and I'm really excited that the book is having such. They just came out with a new book, Encounter at Rendlesham Forest, and this really details this extraordinary event. I mean, as you know, this was probably the most documented case in UFO history.
Now, why don't you give our listeners that don't know about Rendlesham, maybe give them the 30,000-foot overview of what happened.
Oh, Lordy. Okay, so it was, oh my goodness, it was in Rendlesham Forest. It was so now that you asked me this, now I'm like totally having some sort of blank. Okay, hang on, let me just... Okay,
no problem.
I'm so sorry. Oh my Lord. Okay, so it took place in the UK, and it was a long time ago. It was about 1980, and there were a series, and it was over December. It was over the holidays when there were military personnel that were called just right off base to investigate some extraordinary lights.
Right.
And so all of Jim Peniston, all of these people had experiences, and some can remember specific events, and some have had really traumatic events. But it was having this sighting that was so close to, the base, having all of these credible people see it, the subsequent basically cover up of the information that was being withheld.
Now was this? Let me ask you this, and there are so many. There are so many different cases out there. Was this the one where somebody physically actually touched the craft, or am I thinking of?
Yes.
Okay, so this craft was low enough to the ground. Was it one of the officers or something actually ran his hands on actually physically touched this?
Yes, it was Peniston.
Okay.
Jim Peniston.
Okay, gotcha.
So it let me, just, forgive me if I got
a little sidetracked.
I know. Well, this is my brain on no food and not having enough Diet Coke for today. So there you have it. But it is an extraordinary case that I'm looking forward to reading the book. The book is great so far. So
there's so many of them, Erica. I mean, you've got Roswell, which never dies.
No, and it shouldn't.
And it shouldn't. It keeps going. This case, the Allagash abduction.
Yep.
Travis Hill's thing. I mean, there's just so many of them that are out there, and they're all told from a little bit different perspective, and just some unbelievable things that have occurred and have happened.
It is amazing, and I think it sounds when you first start hearing about this, and a couple of my friends are pretty skeptical family members that shall remain anonymous. But when you look at this, excuse me, from the outside in, you have a tendency when you don't know about it. I mean, it sounds nuts. I mean, I admit it. Sometimes I hear things or I look at cases and I think, there's no way this is happening. But then you do a little more research, and then you go down that rabbit hole, and you realize
there's more to this.
There's more to this.
Exactly.
The government knows it's happening, so we just need to wake up and really look into it
and dig into it. Some questions came in for you. It says, Erica, is there any real proof that you've seen of a base on the moon or anything strange related to the moon or the lunar surface?
Oh, great question. There is a lot of controversy about that very subject. I think a lot of people believe that there is a base on the dark side of the moon. I have not researched this enough to really make a decision either way. I think it's a great possibility.
Interesting photos.
It is an interesting
There's
photo.
I know on the moon. I don't know if they call it that. There's something about the size of like a big tower. I mean, there's a lot of. I don't know if those are just. I mean, at the end of the day, they could be a shadow or an anomaly. I know, Curiosity is sending pictures back. Some people are saying, that's grave sites. You look at it and you go, well, but it looks like rocks. And then there was the one picture of the rat. So something looked like a big rat.
Well, you know what? I remember when Curiosity, first, oh my gosh, they started to release photos. There was a shape that you could see. And to me, I mean, it not being somebody that, I'm not a trained observer in this regard, but it looked very suspicious to me. And then interestingly enough, you don't find those photos anymore, and that subject is kind of glossed over. I think we have seen some really interesting things from the photos.
I know.
From Mars.
Well, it is from Mars. Yeah. What do you think we're going to get there eventually? I mean, you've got Elon Musk and SpaceX making some huge progress. I mean, I think this machine called NASA, while I think it is so interesting, while it is interesting, it's just such a big machine that takes so much money and the politics and everything. And Elon's launching stuff now for a quarter of the cost. And I mean, he wants to see space exploration furthered and out of government hands.
I think that would be great because, unfortunately, we know that we aren't told the whole story. And so, NASA is a wonderful organization, and I applaud them for all of the great things they do. But at the end of the day, how much information are we really getting? I don't know.
Well, hopefully we'll get there in our lifetime. I'd like to see it happen. Bill, who called in, writes in and says, can you ask Erica about her interest and inspiration of John Mack's work and the case with the Zimbabwe children in 1994?
Oh, you know what? This is such a great case. And he was, Dr. Mack was...
Now, I don't know this one.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, okay. So Dr. Mack was a Harvard psychologist, a child psychologist, and he started looking at cases involving little children that were having these extraordinary claims. And he was presented with this case over in Zimbabwe, a schoolyard full of children that had a sighting where a craft came down and a being came off the craft and telepathically conveyed to these children, your Earth is in grave danger. You're doing things to your planet that need to be addressed. The thing that was so interesting about this mass sighting was, these children, especially at this young age, they weren't really exposed to a lot that we are probably in America. And so they don't have a lot of these images in their minds. Dr. Mack went over there and started interviewing these children. And he was really, this was a really pivotal thing for him. And so he began really delving into the abduction phenomena after this case, this landmark, extraordinary case. And so he was just wonderful, and we lost a person really way too soon. It was unfortunate.
Was that so? Was there several children that experienced this?
There were. Excuse me, my allergies are bad today. There were. Oh my gosh, there were at least, from my recollection, 30 children that had this experience. It was interesting because you can go back and actually, YouTube it and watch his interviews with these children, and they are so
innocent.
Just innocent, sincere.
Right.
And then you can hear some interviews or see the teachers and people that were there when this happened, and they were just saying how shocking and terrified these kids were. They didn't know what to make of it. So it's just fascinating. Anybody that wants to look at abduction research.
Did he document all this stuff? I mean, did he film these children?
Yes.
And this is stuff you can go out there and take a look at.
In fact, there's he has a research foundation of people that are still, keeping his work alive. And at the symposium, we actually, and I didn't get a chance to meet her. She was very shy, but there was actually a girl that was a woman now that was one of those children.
Really?
And so they've actually done some things where they're researching or they're reaching out to, which has been difficult from what I understand, reaching out to these now adults and getting their take on the situation, 20 years after the fact. And they're still and will always be profoundly affected by what occurred.
Right. Did these children, did they get any messages as far as timeline goes?
Not to my knowledge. I think it was just a pretty short and succinct thing, and your Earth is in trouble. You need to do something. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. What other ones interest you? What other things? I mean, Bud Hopkins.
I loved Bud Hopkins too, and he worked with all of these people and really went out on the edge, and that's I commend Dr. Mack and Bud Hopkins for doing this, because they took a lot of heat, especially John Mack, because he was with Harvard and he faced a lot of personal and professional ridicule over this whole thing. But yeah, Bud Hopkins was amazing. Whitley Strieber, I've always liked his work, and Communion was a great book. So, and then I'm reading Mary Rodwell. I mean, I love listening to her. She's got an interesting perspective on things, and I also, Kathleen Martin, like I've mentioned.
Right.
She's
great.
Oh gosh, and I got to meet her, and it was fabulous. So if you can ever budget it in, go to the International MUFON Symposium. It was a great event.
Okay, so now where was that this year? Where did you go? Was that?
So that was in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
And that I like I said at the beginning of the show, I met the most amazing people, and I came back so fired up about really getting the MUFON, the Utah going, because these people are and this sounds so silly, but they're so down to earth,
right,
and they are so brilliant and dedicated, and they volunteer. So we just, MUFON has got some great people involved, and if you're ever really board, please go to MUFON.com and look at the Science Review Board. Look at the abduction research team. These are wonderful people.
Let's get to some of the questions. Speaking of abduction, a question came and said, what are your thoughts on regressive hypnosis for recovering missing or lost memories during an abduction?
That's always a hot button issue for people. That can be, I think if you don't have somebody that's really trained and knowledgeable, it can lead you into a pretty interesting path. Mm-hmm. And you don't often, I think you can get information that isn't accurate. But when you find somebody that is reputable, I think it can be a great way of accessing subconscious memories.
Like Yvonne Smith.
Yeah,
I know one of the best, all the interviews are, like I said, I honor everybody who comes on and gives me their time and talks about their work. But one of the most memorable interviews that I ever had, and it is in the archive for people to listen to, is the Jesse Long interview. Jesse went through regression with Yvonne Smith. And Jesse he has no books. He doesn't do many talk shows. I got his number through another guest, and I called him up. I actually emailed him. He emailed me back. Jesse, of all the abductees I have talked to, and I've said this many, many times in the program, boy, just listening to that interview again, it gives you a lump in your throat because he is so sincere. His abduction scenario started out when he was, I believe, 4 or 5 years old. He was actually getting abducted right out the front door of his home. He grew up in Tennessee. He would come out the door to go to school. The crafts would appear. He talks about essentially time coming to a halt because he said, the obvious question is, you come out the front door with your brothers and sisters, and there's the school bus, and you get abducted, and how does nobody see that?
Right.
And he talks about how time stops. And he went through, he believes through regression. You can look on YouTube. You can search Jesse on Jesse. You can all his stuff is captured on YouTube films with Yvonne Smith taking the regression, doing the regression therapy, and him just literally screaming and yelling and stuff like that. These beings that captured him. First of all, he talks very candidly. Some people have had good experiences. He said every time it happened, he was looking for objects. He said he would have killed everybody in this craft if he could have, because he was being taken. He had no will of his own, just outside of his own will. He was forced. If you do a little bit of research, he feels he was forced to physically mate with some sort of non-human entity. Talks about hybrid children, possibly having tons of them, and was going through the abduction scenarios for over 34 years. At age 40, it stopped.
Wow.
Really a powerful interview. I didn't say much. I let him talk. And the thing that really, which I ask this question of a lot of people who study the abduction phenomenon, is what he experienced. He's in the window business, and he would travel from Tennessee to Texas quite a bit. And he would drive the company he works for, I believe still works for, I think he's a realtor down there now too. He would take his own car, and he would end up going with other coworkers. And while this was all going on, they would be driving down, I-95 out of Dallas, and it'd be a blue, clear, sunny day. And he said these crafts would appear literally right on the horizon, right near the car. And he would look over to his peer, his coworker, and say, "Now, don't think I'm crazy. You do see that, right?" And they'd be like, "What are you talking about? There's nothing there." While this thing was casting shadows on the road with the sunlight and everything. And that's something that I find interesting, and I talked to Grant Cameron about, is abductees or people that experience these things. They see craft, they see things that nobody else sees, and it's right there.
Right. And that seems to be very common from everything that
right.
I read from all of the people that I talk to from my own personal experiences. I think once you have that one moment where you're opened up to things, that's when you get that shift in your reality, and you have almost this intuitive ability to make a connection. It's fascinating.
Well, again, he just is so interesting, but he, listening to his story for 2 hours was just, was just unbelievable. And all the things that he went through, and he talked about the sights and the sounds and the smells, and he was with his abductions, he was well awake when it happened. I know some people talk about how they're kind of in a dream state, or I guess some have compared it to as being pretty intoxicated or almost inebriated, and you're kind of flowing in and out of reality. But in his case, he would come to, when it happened, he wouldn't know what happened as he called it, when he was captured, because that's the only way he could look at it or view it. He felt he was captured like a Vietnam prisoner, is the way he regarded it. He would be captured, taken, and then he would come to have his senses, be able to look around, see, smell, touch, everything like that. But was always somewhat immobilized. When he was calm, these beings would not restrain him in any way. But when he would get, and in time, he did get calm, because it was just a fact of life. But there were times he'd get very upset when this would happen. And he said he would literally go into a fit of rage where he would look for objects, and he said he wanted to kill everybody in this room, everybody.
Well, yeah.
And they would, however they would do it, they would restrain him. But his story is just absolutely amazing. And again, of all the abductees that I've talked to, and I'm not saying that I don't believe that something has happened to these people, this guy, down to earth, either that or he needs to win a Grammy for the performance, because, just very, very interesting.
It is fascinating, and these people, you have to, you're heartbroken for what you hear them going through. I mean, this is not only is it a traumatic experience to be taken against your will and just have all of these ghastly things happen to you, but then there's also this component that carries into your daily life when you are having relationships with family members and coworkers, and the public shame if you dare to talk about it, and then just the emotional torment. When is this going to happen to me again? I mean, it's such a loaded thing. It's painful, and I'm glad that we have people that are very sensitive to this sort of thing.
A question that Sky sends in for you. She says, has Erica ever heard of an energy ball/orb in someone's house that communicated through some form of telepathy?
I personally have had experiences with paranormal phenomena. Like I mentioned, I've witnessed lots of orbs in my home over the years.
Really? Not dust bunnies in the
camera. No, they are not dust bunnies.
You've actually seen things.
Yes. And the funny thing, and I used to live in a home that was really haunted, and so we would have just crazy things happen all the time. And the great thing for me was that all this phenomena took place with 20 of my friends there,
and they saw it.
And they did, and it was, it was a little frightening at first, but it was a kick after a while. It was like, oh my gosh, they're our buddies right there. But the orb thing was a kind of a frequent thing. I have, I don't recall from my own personal experiences ever having an orb communicate with me. It was always a pretty quick occurrence. But
now you said this spaceship that you saw, or this craft you saw, you felt was connected with you in some way.
I do. It was such...
You felt a connection.
I do. I did. And I almost felt like, whatever I was witnessing knew I was there.
Do you think, let me ask you this. Now, this may sound like a crazy question, but do you think that while you saw it and people around you saw it, there were others that didn't see it? Not because they didn't look up, but because they weren't supposed to see it.
Oh, I suppose that could be the case. But to me, when this happened and having so many people that I even just talked to about it because I was so concerned and in shock, lots of people did see it that weren't even in the same radius as I was. So I don't know. I think then you look at the Phoenix lights and things like that. And those, to me, that what happened in Phoenix is so remarkably similar to what I've experienced, especially Dr. Lynn Tai.
Yes.
She's
We've had her on the show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
She's a great guest because you know what? You don't have to interview her. She just goes.
Oh,
yeah. Lynn is.
I have no doubt about it.
We had her on, and it was a great interview. I kind of call these more of a just a chat session. I'm not into scripted questions and stuff. I take questions from guests, and it's nice to have talking points. But yeah, Lynn, it's like Stanton. Stanton's best guest to have on because all I got to do is lean back in this chair,
Isn't that
and he just goes, and she does too.
She's phenomenal.
She is.
Really, I got at the symposium. I actually bought her book and got to speak with her. And on the airplane home, I was reading the first couple chapters, and I almost dropped the book on the floor because I thought this is exactly what happened to me. This was my own personal experience. And so since that time I've communicated with her, and I'm hoping to talk to her. I'm hoping this week, because for me, I believe all of this phenomena is related. How is it related? I don't know, but it sure seems to be happening worldwide.
Now, doesn't Lynn talk also about when I had her on the program? Again, she. And I'm saying this in jest. I mean, she covered so much material in 2 hours that she lives very close or had a line of sight view in what she would almost consider as another Skinwalker type ranch, an area where they have orbs, where they have a lot of Indian heritage that's straight out of her back patio. She can see it's a canyon. I can't think of what it's called, but has a lot of very similar to what we have happen down in Duchesne.
Right. And there was, I think there was a...
Uinta Basin.
Yeah, there was, for her, it seems like, and I'm just remembering her fabulous lecture that I heard, but she had, and going back to the book, she had, her and her husband were out on the deck and
now they're both doctors. I mean, they don't need money or nothing like that.
They were, I think this was an experience that really was, she was worried about her career. She was, it took a long time for her to publicly come out and say, this is who I am. This is the experience I had. But she was so smart in the fact that immediately when she started getting, video footage, she found out the people that she needed to take this to, and she was relentless at really making sure this was followed up and making sure that however she could, she was getting media attention to this. And then, when the big sighting happened over Phoenix, I mean, it just kind of fell into place, and all of these people came together, and Symington coming out as the governor, as slow as that may have been, he did. And that's a big thing. But
and they tried to, what I thought was interesting is how the debunkers tried to talk about, it was a military exercise with flares. I don't know how flares can hover for 40 minutes.
Well,
and then what is interesting, and now if you want to talk about a little conspiracy, there are people, and Lynn talked about this craft, I mean, it was there. People saw it. It had a superstructure. And a lot of those photos, people took them, they posted them. A lot of them have been taken down because now you just kind of get the big triangle of lights and that's it. But they said a lot of those people posted that stuff right after it happened, and there was superstructure. There was, and now it's nowhere to be found.
Isn't that interesting? And that was, and then then there was one person in particular that was a big debunker that was there. They kind of, it was interesting to see what happened. But, Lynn was very good at contacting the military immediately after all of these things happened. Okay, tell me, go over with me. What was happening? Were you doing drills this day? Da, 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 da. Mm-hmm. And she has these responses from the military. No, they weren't doing drills. No. And so then 2 months later, all of a sudden, oh, whoops, we were doing one. We forgot about that. So it's sure. Interesting. And then you've got the flare theory. Well, okay, that really, that's just ridiculous. No, it didn't.
All right, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Erica Lukes. Erica, thank you for being a good sport and sticking around a little bit longer.
Absolutely.
A question that came in from our buddy Bill up in the Northeast said, do you think a MUFON field investigator should be a skeptic or an experiencer, and how can that affect an investigation?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I think that you should always be skeptical. I think that you need to not reach for the first thing that comes. You don't want to say, oh my goodness, this person had a UFO sighting. You have to go through a very rigorous process of proving that this was in fact something that is not from the earth. And that takes a lot, So right. Very often, there aren't a lot of cases that we really get where it's like, wow. But then you also have to have a little bit of, you have to be open-minded. And I think you don't get involved in MUFON unless you have a little bit of curiosity.
So now let me ask you this: is an investigator, if, let's say, I submit a report to MUFON and MUFON feels that it's valid, and I assume they look through things too and probably go yay, nay, I mean, you have to. If it gets to the point where MUFON contacts you and says, hey, this guy Pat, he saw something pretty cool, which I actually did see pretty cool, and I never reported it, but I've talked about it too many times.
Okay, well, tonight's your night.
And so it gets into your in basket. Does a field investigator actually physically go out and talk with somebody? Do they make a phone call? Is it communicated through email?
It depends on the case. And sometimes, like right now, we don't have as many field investigators as we need. And so, we've got 2 or 3 people that are located in Salt Lake that are doing all the field investigations. So if we get a call in Moab, obviously we don't have that capability. If there was something that would we need to get down there right away, that's when you'd mobilize the STAR team and we would get there. Most of the time we do phone interviews. We also are very good. We have to do background research when we get a case report. So we're looking at the weather. We're looking at other websites for sightings reports. We are doing all of this stuff. So you want, and you also know that other people are looking at you, so you have to be, you have to be a little bit, you have to know what you're talking about and present scientific data and information.
So people that are going to become investigators, and even, I'll be honest with you, I've never been affiliated with MUFON, and I know for a long time, there was no state director here, and is it Jim, the guy who was the guy in Tennessee? Max. Sorry, I want to say Jim Max. After the interview, I actually called him and I thanked him, and I talked to him on the phone for about a half hour off air, and I had some interest in it at one time. It's a committed thing, so my hat's off to you. This is not like, he just told me right when I talked to him on the phone, he goes, this is not just because you feel like you got nothing better to do. I mean, it's a committed thing. Obviously, MUFON has to, approve you, if you will. I mean, this isn't just something, hey, this position, and I didn't take it from that perspective, but I said I did have interest in it. And when I sat down and we talked on the phone for a half hour and he told me what was involved, I was like, okay, that's a little bit too much for me to do.
You're right. It's
very involved.
It is involved, especially when you want to be a field investigator, but it's not, it's doable for people if you want to put the time commitment into studying and you have an interest in this. I think being a field investigator is fascinating. Do we have lots of cases right now? We don't. So if you were to say, I want to be a field investigator in Utah, you'd maybe get 1 or 2 cases a month. You can handle that. That's great.
Right.
And so I think I love being involved with MUFON. I think you need to be involved, and I'm going to just hopefully.
Okay. Sure.
It's good stuff.
We'll
it's a great organization. They worked really hard.
Okay. Now here's a question that came in from a MUFON investigator.
Ooh.
Rachel writes in, says, as a MUFON investigator, I believe Rachel is out of Atlanta, I have found it hard to get witnesses to call or email me back. How aggressive are you at trying to get in touch with the witnesses?
Rachel, I hear you on that one. That can be frustrating. In fact, I'm working on a couple cases right now, and I can't get anybody to return my telephone call. I will send out, I send out the email, and then, I send out, I probably stop at 3 emails. I'll make a couple phone calls, and then you just have to close the case out because you can't get any more information. And that's frustrating because these people have obviously taken the time to file a report. Why aren't they calling you back? Who knows? So that's the tough part of doing it.
And she responds to that and says, I don't want to be a pest, but yet I have a report to fill out and I need more information to figure things out if they had a true UFO sighting or something man-made. Sometimes I know by the initial report, but I like to ask questions anyway just to be sure. So very thorough investigator she is.
That's great. I think be a pest.
Just keep calling.
They gave you a phone number. They gave you an email. So, and then at the very least that shows that you are taking this seriously, and that's great. Good for you.
See, Rachel,
I wish you were here. Dang it.
And she says that MUFON has made a lot of improvements. So
they have.
Anyway, interesting. And some of the other listeners are saying, I've called MUFON a couple of times. Took a lot for me to pick up the phone, and I thought I'd never ever do it again, but I did. So it's good. If you see something or hear something, it's good. And she's located in Montgomery, Alabama. I thought Atlanta, so in Alabama.
Wow, we've got some listeners from all over. This
the
is
country.
fantastic.
Yeah,
people that know about MUFON. That's great.
They do, the MUFON movement.
And let me, I just want to throw something out there. Since this is a volunteer organization, we try, and especially as a state director, our main goal, and it's a field and guest investigator, is to immediately, within a 24-hour period, contact the witnesses. And so we try to do that. That's something that we need to do, and we do it. But, every once in a while, people do need to take into account that we do have other
families and work
we do.
and job
this
and businesses.
Is volunteer, but we take this very seriously. So.
No, I understand, and I think it's such a couple comments that some people have sent in is that I think it is a serious subject, and people need to realize that it is a volunteer organization. And yes, if you've had something happen or you've experienced something or you've seen something, I mean, this side of having them locked up in the barn with the UFO, then you call me if you want. But I mean, like you said, you've got children, you've got dinner to cook, you've got families to take care of, you've got a job to go to, you've got a home to clean. I mean, and then you're doing this all on top of that. And again, people just need to understand that.
Right, and I think that's such a great thing about MUFON they're all volunteers. How wonderful is that we have so many people volunteering because this is such a worthwhile topic.
It is. You want to take another call?
Yeah, let's do it.
Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Tuck. You're on with Erica.
Yeah, I just want to know if Erica, how many people have don't remember anything, but they woke up with scars on them.
Oh, I think that is something that happens typically during the abduction phenomena. People will wake up and have strange marks on their body, burns, cuts.
How about scars?
Yes, there are specific. I believe that that's one of the traits of an abduction is to have.
Does MUFON now these files can the general public look through these files or?
Absolutely.
I mean, okay, so you can. So you go out to MUFON.com and take a look at the cases
yes, you
closed
can look through
and maybe
all the case histories, and it's fascinating. And obviously people will remain anonymous, but that have requested to be. But it's fascinating. It's good to do for your state.
I've woken up. I woke up one morning with 2 scars on my legs that weren't there the day before.
So is that something that's common for you, or is this just something?
No, these are scars that weren't there the day before the day before.
So it was a cut that had completely healed?
No, it was not a cut. There was no cuts. There was no blood. There were just scars.
And did you feel that you experienced some sort of an event?
No, it's just that I woke up with these 2 scars, and they're like about 6 inches apart, straight down from each other on my leg.
And are you, if you would like to, please take a picture of those. That would be good. And then if you can, even if not remembering something, if you can go in and file a report with the picture of your scars, that would be really, really great and helpful.
Okay, I was wondering, because this happened like back in '94 when it happened.
That's interesting, and waking up, that must be disconcerting to have woken up and see these scars and not know where they came from. That's a little scary for you. I'm sorry. Yeah,
when I was got in the bathtub and started washing my leg, I noticed them, and they weren't there the day before. So.
Wow.
Wow. Well, do that. You can go in and talk about something that happened 20, 30 years ago. Sure. So please go in and file a report. That's important.
Okay.
Hey, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, well, and again, like you said, even if it's something that you experienced years ago, why, go ahead and put it in. It can't hurt. Maybe it'll help bring some closure or connectivity, some things from the same time period.
Exactly. In fact, we had a great case that I investigated a few months ago, and it was a fellow that had a sighting, and he was up at the Shriners Hospital, and he had this sighting, 30 years ago, and he was in a room up there, and he was recovering from surgery, and he was with a nurse and a few of the other children, and noticed these orange objects over Kennecott Copper.
Really?
And it was quite disturbing to him and everybody, including the adult that was present with him. And so he just felt like it was his time and he needed to make a statement about this. It had haunted him. And so he went in and made, did the case report about something that happened earlier. And that does help us.
Right. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Erica, thank you for being here for not only 2 and your partner in crime over there, but 3 hours tonight. It was an honor, and we'd love to help you, and we will help you as much as we can with MUFON and anything we can do and get the word out. And no matter, I shouldn't say the word crazy, but no matter what experience you have, whether marks on you or something you remember or a flashback, it all. Put it down on paper.
Right. Please do. And reach out to MUFON, become a member, become active. That's so important. We need help. We need field investigators. We need members. And we love to connect. And this is important. This is how we're going to get the word out.
So it's about being open-minded.